The Winnipeg Jets just finished surviving the Chicago Blackhawks. And yes, I did just say surviving. It wasn't a pretty game. The top line got creamed, but Nick Ehlers and a great overtime goal from Kyle Connor saved the day. Find out more on tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets.
You're Locked On the Hockey Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, friends, and welcome to tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Harrison Lee, an avid Winnipeg Jets fan and an online blogger. You can follow me on Twitter at HLLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. As always, thanks for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on all of your favorite podcasting platforms and YouTube. Doing so, of course, is always free of charge and ensures you never miss another episode. Most of all, though, we just love and appreciate your support. And of course, we're rolling up here on the close of the season, at least the regular season, in just a little over a month and a half or so. This is going to be a great stretch run, and I can't wait to keep chatting with you and hopefully getting to cover some more Jets wins. Now, speaking of covering some more Jets wins, Winnipeg just finished beating the Blackhawks 3-2 in overtime. And yeah, this game, there's a lot to unpack, right? There are some really interesting things, some very worrying things, and just about everything in between. So let's start off with the good, because we always enjoy talking about the good, right? Winnipeg has tested out some new line combos, and some of those combos in particular looked really good. The trio of Ehlers, Monahan, and Iafallo actually seem to have some really nice chemistry. This was one of the first times Iafallo has looked comfortable on a line recently, too. I thought that he complemented the way that Ehlers and Monahan were playing off of each other really well, and also offered some nice defensive support. I saw a couple of zone entry denials when he was defending his own blue line, and it looked like he just seemed to be, I don't know, more of an active participant and a nice compliment. So if that trio sticks together, wouldn't mind that at all. It seems like they actually played pretty well, and that's the kind of stuff you want to see. Another trio that I thought looked pretty fun was Barron, Nemesnikov, and Perfetti. I'm just sort of resigning myself to the fact that, Bones isn't really going to trust Perfetti with a lot of significant ice time. So if you're going to use him in a more sparing role, then what you could do is put him on a technical fourth line, but then just use that more as like a second, third line, which if that's the case, I don't mind that approach at all either, right? That's kind of what the Jets several years ago used to do. You had like a first, a second, and then two third lines, and that allowed Winnipeg to really roll a lot of pressure and add, skill up and down the lineup, which that trio of Barron, Nemesnikov, and Perfetti, I thought looked really impressive. They found each other in some good spots, and I thought Barron in particular looked like a player who, I've advocated for him for a while to get more ice time and actually play with skill, and I feel like he really vindicated that. His forechecking, I thought, was effective. He made some really nice passes, and he had a good sense of where Perfetti was and made some good plays alongside Nemesnikov. All three, I thought, had some really nice performances. Overall, just a good thing to see. And then, of course, the breakout star for this game was going to be Nick Ehlers. He had a 2-goal performance, and, what a performance it was. The first goal was a beautiful shot that I think a lot of people weren't really expecting, but Ehlers has that craftiness where he can just rip one. And then the second goal was on a delayed penalty, just beat Mrazek cleanly down the center slot area. A beautiful shot, perfect release, and Mrazek never really had a chance. And then you could also say that he was partially at fault for the game-tying goal later, thanks to a bit of a misclearance. He really needed to get the puck out and tried to make a diving play at the blue line. Didn't quite get there. And, unfortunately, Chicago then tied it on a goal line scramble. But overall, I think if you wanted a confidence-restoring game for Ehlers, and one that just reminded people of why I've been advocating for him to get back on the top line, this was it. Now, I said that there were some good things and there were some bad things. And let's talk about the bad, because there's quite a bit for this game. And I know they just won and all, but, unfortunately, we're going to have to talk about this because some of these problems you can see we're going to outline, in greater detail. But yeah, the top line had one of the worst games I've ever seen from a Jets top line. It just was, it's the kind of performance where I think you could argue they deserve to be benched for most of the game. And it wasn't just Connor or Scheifele or Velarde, all three of them together were horrendous, which is really not as common to say. Past couple of games, though, it's been really, really, really brutal. In other games, I mean, we've at least seen Velarde and maybe even Connor or Scheifele connect for at least a goal or something, but otherwise, they just got completely caved in. They had so many failed zone entries in the offensive zone. They really just had absolutely nothing going. Again, one of the most horror show performances we've seen from a top line in ages. And then to make matters even more amusing, in overtime, Connor and Scheifele started together, and Connor ended up scoring in overtime off a deflection to, I guess, sort of patch it up, right? Overall, though, yeah, one of the worst performances I've seen from a Jets top line. I sort of half-jokingly said that I couldn't remember more than like 3 good plays from that line the entire night. Honestly, though, the more I think about it, the more I realize I've struggled to think of one good play. It was a really, really brutal performance. It's been continuing a trend for a while now where, the trio just doesn't work. And it really comes down to that pairing of Connor and Scheifele. They're just bad for each other. I hate to say it. I know that they like playing with each other, but if you're looking at line combos and which trios and duos work really well and which don't, I think we have 6,000 hours of evidence that shows that Scheifele and Connor don't work well together. It wasn't just a Wheeler thing, right? 81 and 55, we have talked about it time and time and time again that this trio just doesn't work. Thankfully, Connor Hellebuyck really stood tall this game and ended up doing enough to kind of paper over some of their worst defensive lapses, but whew, it was a rough one. Also rough, Neil Pionk and, Brendan Dillon together. Yeah, another horror show performance. Not a banner evening for either defender. Honestly, the defense in general, outside of like Morrissey, was just, it wasn't great. Winnipeg's blue line struggled. You could see that kind of like a lot of teams that have been taking advantage of stuff below the goal line recently. The Jets struggled with Chicago's press below that goal line area. And there was just a lot of crease chaos that the Jets weren't really able to take advantage of. And so Chicago had more freedom to cycle it from a low to high position and then back down, which for the Jets really isn't ideal because it starts to stretch their defensive shape. And when you get the Jets chasing shadows and stuff, Winnipeg is, honestly not great at defending those opportunities. So it's very good that Hellebuyck is the best goalie in the league because this is one of those games where the Jets defense was more than a little bit generous with the puck. Unfortunately, in the wrong way. But, against all odds, the Jets still came out with the victory. So that's good. But yeah, if you're looking for some points of concern, unfortunately, there were a lot this game. And I think it's just more of the same rather than something new. The past couple of years, these have been issues we've seen before. They're not really going away. And it's just really a question of whether the coaching staff is going to finally recognize those problems and make changes. Because if they do, Winnipeg should be fine, right? Like the Jets, and that's kind of what's frustrating for me is the Jets are really close to solving things and having a team that's back to the way it was before. But until they recognize the core central issues, we're going to keep seeing some of the same stuff again and again. So let's focus on the power or the top line in just a moment, not the power play. Power play also bad, but we've talked about that enough. Let's focus on the top line in just a moment. Before we get into that, though, and talking about why this performance was particularly awful, I just wanted to shout out our friends and partners at Indeed. We're driven by the search for better, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need a hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors. And, of course, they help you ditch the busy work. You can use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging all in one easy platform so you can connect with quality candidates faster. And, of course, they not only deliver candidates faster, but they also give you some of the highest quality matches that are based on the job listing specifications you're looking for. They don't want you to have to sort through tons and tons of resumes that don't fit what you need. They want to make this as easy as possible. And as somebody who has actually used Indeed when I was looking for work, I can attest to their detailed forms and everything being really easy to use. So, if you're an employer and you're looking for quality candidates, I feel like Indeed has to be an ideal service to really turn to. I came away impressed. I've used them time and time again. Fantastic service. And you should join more than 3.5 million businesses that agree with me and use Indeed to hire great talent fast. Right now, listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on the Locked On Winnipeg Jets podcast. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Hello, friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Every day, thank you so much for rejoining us on tonight's episode as we are sort of following up on some stuff that happened post-Winnipeg versus Chicago. A lot of thoughts about this game. I feel like I've ranted a little more than usual on this episode so far, but, I'm just trying to be real, right? The Jets, they were not very good. I think that's the bottom line. I know they came out with a victory, but I felt like that was more in spite of the performance on the ice than because of it. So let's talk about the top line, right? The top line, I would say, had one of the worst performances of any line in this whole game, and it's not exactly like it's a new problem. This has been something that's been a recurring issue for the last few weeks. Before we really dive into what's gone wrong for this trio and how the Jets can potentially address it, just wanted to shout out something really cool the Locked On Network is doing. We have launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and we're also available on Amazon Fire TV's free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with our local experts and our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and now the free Fire TV channels app on the Amazon Fire TV service. Now, circling back to the Jets, right? I'm not trying to take a dump on this top line. I know that these players are immensely talented. Scheifele, Connor, and Vilardi all bring something unique to this team, and it's obvious that they are among the elites of the NHL in terms of scoring prowess and offensive skill. But when they're together, it's just a lot of that kind of gets washed away. It's tough to watch them go out there and basically spend almost every shift pinned in their own defensive zone. And even when they finally get some offensive zone activation, it's rare that it actually results in anything, right? You see them turn over the puck at the blue line, or sometimes they try to make a pass across the slot. It goes nowhere. Or even when they finally get a shot off, it's not like it's from the most dangerous areas. It feels like Connor's kind of been struggling to find his place and where he should stay. Scheifele has tried to force more and more passes. None of them are working out. And Vilardi, unfortunately, the defensive impact that I was hoping to see from him just sort of gets negated when he's playing alongside Connor and Scheifele. It's just a comedy of frustration and errors. And I think at some point, the coaching staff is just going to have to make a hard decision. I know that Scheifele probably wants to play with Kyle. I'm sure that has been one of his key requests and probably one of the biggest reasons that line has stayed together. But at some point, enough is enough. The top line is honestly bad enough to where it could sink a lot of what makes the Jets so potent. And I know people will say, oh, it's just one line, right? It's a team sport. But you have to think about how that one line impacts everyone else downstream. Part of the reason having an elite top line would really make the Jets super dangerous is because the other lines feed off of that, right? If you're winning top-end matchups against some of the best players in the league, and let's just be honest, Ehlers, Scheifele, and Vilardi dominated when they were out there, it opens up so much more in terms of your matchup ability with, say, a trio like Perfetti, Nemestikov, and Barron. That trio, you could start to give some softer and easier matchups to, and based on what we saw with this trio tonight, they ate up those minutes already as is. Imagine what would happen if they could also have perhaps some relief because the top line was able to take care of its assignments. Same with the Lowry line. Same with any other trio that you think of. It doesn't even matter. It's just something that would benefit everyone, and it would also take away some of the stress on the bottom nine, I guess you could say, to make up the difference. But unfortunately, because the Jets' top line is so dysfunctional, it's becoming a problem to where the third and fourth lines have really had to bail the Jets out, because it's not like the second line has always been fantastic either. And we're talking about the Lowry line, if we're being honest. That is your real second line, and whether it should be, well, debatable, right? Probably not, but based on how Bones likes to run things, you sort of know what you're getting into. So yeah, frustration there. And like I said, I think the fix would actually be pretty straightforward. And I think there are two ways that you can go about it. Or honestly, you might even be able to do just both at the same time, depending on what the coaching staff is willing to do. But the key thing that would help the Jets a lot is just to swap Ehlers and Connor. I know Ehlers, Monahan, and Iafallo look good together. That's great. I like that trio, but if you're looking for the most dominant and most effective use of what Ehlers does best, you got to put him back with Scheifele and Velarde. Those three played brilliantly together, and it wasn't like it was just one game. They generally outplayed the competition in almost every game that they played, even when they weren't scoring. Just a dynamite trio, looked like they weren't going to be stopped at all, and this was all when Connor was out. Once Connor returned, all of that just kind of went away because the lineup balance completely got shifted and the coaching staff went to old combos that unfortunately we know don't work, but they just continue to go back to time and time again. Now, that's one way to do it. If you want to try and offer something else, the Jets might be after a top six winger who can kind of carry Scheifele and Connor, because if they're going to demand to play with each other, well, then you're going to have to find somebody other than Velarde who can carry that load, because as it is right now, Velarde was kind of swimming in this game. I know the last game he had a pretty big outing, but, otherwise it's been tough sledding for him, and having him try to manage around their defensive lapses and liabilities and some of the forced passes and stuff, it's just not really working out. And he himself just looks like he's really struggling. He's had some really bad turnovers. All that kind of stuff to me tells or tells the story that, this trio as a whole just is terrible for one another. They don't work together. Ehlers and Scheifele and Velarde had great chemistry. Scheifele and Velarde, we know, can work well together. They just need the right pairing partner, and I don't really know who else you can point to that's really going to be able to do it. If you're not going to do that, then you'd better find a player who can and can work with Connor and Scheifele, because it's not going to be Gabe. I think that's become abundantly clear, and I don't honestly know if somebody out there that's on the trade market could even do this, but I guess you could go after like a Buchnevich or something. Even then, I got to be honest, I don't know if Pavel can carry the burden of playing with those guys together on that line trio, but I mean, it is what it is, right? We've talked about it before. I don't expect it to change anytime soon. I wish the Jets would be more open to rethinking these combos, but so far they seem pretty steadfast in it. So we just have to hope that whatever they do at the trade deadline in a few weeks, the Jets can bring in a really big player who can try and help us reformat the top nine, because as it is, there's just too many inefficiencies and things are going to start to come to a head once you hit the playoffs. But let me know what you think about the top line's performance so far. What swaps would you make? I know a lot of you are asking for more grit and size and skill. That's not, or mostly more grit and size. That's not going to help, I can promise you. The Jets don't really have a size issue or anything. They're fine, like physicality wise. It's more like they're not really allocating skill in the right way, and it's putting the team in a really tough spot. So we will have to just hope that the Jets can identify a player who Bones will trust, and he'll actually, bring in and allow, to work with Scheifele and Connor. Because as it is right now, it is a tough watch. Now, I did want to talk about some of those line combos I mentioned earlier, because we might start to see a little bit more of what the Jets want to do in the playoffs, and I'll talk about how that could be a good thing and what some potential drawbacks might be based on that strategy. Before we go too much further, though, I do want to shout out our friends and partners at Ibotta. Right now, a lot of you are probably dealing with expensive grocery bills. I know every time my family heads out there, let's be honest, right? You're spending a couple hundred on groceries for a week, and inflation has really put a lot of typical household items in the stratosphere of costs. And we all could use something of a break, right? It's tough. We want to, be able to get our necessities and stuff, but also be able to afford some of the nice leisures and stuff. And Ibotta totally gets it. They want to make a great service and app that allows you to get money back on every purchase with tons and tons of qualified brands and items. It's everything from groceries to beauty supplies to toys, right? Ibotta wants to give you a great selection to choose from. All you have to do is download the app, create an account, and when you add offers to your account, all you have to do is then just upload a receipt, and you'll get cash back that you can put into PayPal, your bank account, gift cards, whatever it is. They want to help you get cash back and actually feel like you're getting a bit of a discount, right? The average Ibotta user gets back $256 a year. That's maybe 1, 2, even 3 grocery trips, depending on how thrifty you are. So join over 50 million users and earn cash back every time you shop from over 2,700 brands and retailers, including Lowe's, Macy's, Sephora, Best Buy, and so much more. Right now, Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 just for trying Ibotta by using promo code LOCKEDONNHL when you register. Just go to the App Store or Google Play Store and download the free Ibotta app to start earning cash back. And again, use code LOCKEDONNHL. That's IBOTTA in the Google Play or App Store and use code LOCKEDONNHL. Hello, friends, and welcome back to these closing thoughts on tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Everydayers, thank you so much for rejoining us on tonight's episode, as we are just wrapping up really quickly with some thoughts on some line combos the Jets had at the end of this game, or I guess not really at the end of this game, but just in this game against Chicago in general. And I feel like Winnipeg is maybe testing out some stuff ahead of the playoffs, which I don't mind, right? If the Jets are going to do some new line combos and whatnot, this is probably about as ideal a time as there is to start messing with combos and seeing what trios you can really surface. And, the trios of Perfetti, Nemesnikov, and Barron, and Ehlers, Monahan, and Iafallo all looked pretty good. I think what concerns me about some of those usages is that there's a good chance both of those lines aren't going to play that much, and Bones is going to lean really heavily on the first line and the Lowry line, and that for me, again, I get his thinking when it comes to like forechecking and skill and stuff, but I feel like that's not really going to balance out well when you're facing a team like, say, Colorado or Vegas, some of these top contenders in the West that are deeper and faster and stronger than the Jets are, right? Winnipeg probably does not have the offensive horses without a major acquisition to keep up with some of these teams. I know the Knights have now lost Mark Stone and Eichel for presumably most of the season, but if they come back in the playoffs, right, the Jets are going to be really in tough against teams like those. So the Jets probably need to make a trade. I think they're still very much interested in exploring the market. If they can find a way to bring in a Konechny or something on top of introducing McGroarty to the lineup and maybe some sort of defender from some team, I think that would do a lot to alleviate some of the stress and concern. I know it's asking for tons, and I think the Jets are probably only going to be able to bring in like 2 different kinds of players. So if the Jets are looking at these lines, I don't mind these combos in and of themselves, but I do wonder, how are the Jets going to balance things out if you bring in a new player, right? How much longer are they going to tolerate a top line that's getting caved in at even strength? Can they afford to keep it as is? Are they going to be comfortable with this level of performance? Because Velarde has already called out this line and said it did not play well in the last game, and I can't imagine he's going to be thrilled with this game. Just not a performance that I think the team is going to be thrilled with, and I'm sure the players are frustrated individually as well. I don't know if the coaching staff is going to make the right changes. I feel like the front office probably needs to do something to force some sort of an adjustment there, because as it is, I suspect we're going to keep seeing the same combos and the same coaching decisions continually. And obviously, you know how I feel about it. You've probably let me know in the comments below how you felt about it. I've seen quite a few different reactions and thoughts. A lot of folks not thrilled with things, at least when it comes to a couple of very specific lines. But if this is like a playoff preview, then at least you can kind of plug in and play 1 or 2 acquisitions that would really make this team, great, right? I think, you bring in a top 6 winger, and suddenly I'd feel a lot better about how the top 6 arrangement might work, because that addition could really change Rick's kind of lineup thoughts, and he might make some really needed adjustments in some critical spots to facilitate a new high-end skill addition. But otherwise, the Jets are probably going to work within the margins. I imagine that Connor-Scheifele and Velarde are going to keep playing together for the meantime. Yeah, that's just, it's not ideal. It's not what I would want. But I hope that, the Ehlers line and the Perfetti line also kill it and kind of score and keep showing that Bones maybe should start to think about how he arranges these groupings together. Maybe strong continued performances from both of those units will kind of force him to rethink how he deploys them once the playoffs roll around. I know he's very stubborn at times and he can kind of be really set in his ways, but he's also shown at moments that he will be flexible and he's willing to learn. So let's just hope that if he is taking notes and studying, that he's coming away with some major impressions from his best players. I think the one thing the Jets don't want to do is limit their own skill and ability by trying to force, round pegs into square holes. The Jets have lots of talent to work with, and they've got a really strong foundation. But if they keep building it in a way that doesn't make sense, you're not really going to reap the benefits. So let's just hope that the Jets pull it together and can keep, coming up with some better line combos, because this team feels like it's on the verge of starting to piece things together. But as it is right now, not working out so well. Let me know your thoughts on all of this in the comments below or at my social medias at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. For tonight's show, though, that is going to be all the time that we have. I think for the next couple of days, until at least we start to see, the Jets get back into action, it's going to be a very busy next few weeks. But in between then, I'd love to talk more about trade deadline stuff. I know the Jets, we've covered, trade deadline targets, and I know the Jets have been linked to a few teams. I kind of want to dig in a little bit more and try and find maybe some of the best fits, some of the most affordable players, and guys who I think, maybe teams are sleeping on, but that could actually really benefit the Jets, especially players that I think the coaching staff would genuinely trust, because you kind of have to factor that in. I know it's a little bit silly. I know it's not the most ideal way to do it, but it's how the Jets coaching staff can be. So cross your fingers Winnipeg makes the right decision. We'll at least theorize and strategize and hopefully fantasize some really fun trades over the next few weeks. But like I said, for tonight's show, that is all the time that we have. We will see you back here next week for even more Jets coverage. Don't go anywhere. Be sure to like, follow, and subscribe. And as always, have a great night and go Jets go.